Princess Zira stood on the edge of the spaceship, staring out at Earth. This was her mission, to study humans and prove they were dangerous. Her people, the Zrath, believed humans were violent, bloodthirsty creatures. Zira had been chosen to go undercover, to live among the humans and see their true nature. If she could bring back evidence of their cruelty, the Zrath Empire would have an excuse to wipe them out before they became a threat. Zira's heart raced as the spaceship descended through Earth's atmosphere. Her hands gripped the sides of her seat, though she tried to remain calm. This was just another mission, she told herself. She had trained for this. But the stories she had heard about humans, their wars, their endless hunger for power, made her uneasy. Could they really be as dangerous as her people said? The ship landed quietly in a remote area, and Zira stepped out, disguised as a human. Her advanced technology made her look just like one of them. Long black hair, pale skin, and blue eyes. She wore simple Earth clothes, jeans, and a jacket, blending in perfectly. As she walked towards a nearby city, she could already feel the tension in the air. Cars sped by, people hurried down the streets, and everyone seemed to be in a rush. It didn't feel dangerous yet, but Zira stayed alert. Her first stop was a local cafe, where she could observe humans up close. She sat at a table by the window, sipping a coffee and watching people as they passed by. Some looked tired, some were smiling, and others seemed stressed. She noticed how they interacted with each other, how they talked and laughed, but there was something strange. No one seemed like the monsters she had expected. Hours passed, and Zira began to feel frustrated. Where was the violence? Where was the bloodthirst? Just as she was about to leave, she saw something on the TV behind the counter. It was a news report. War in a far-off country, soldiers fighting in the streets, explosions in the background. Zira's eyes widened. There it was, the human hunger for destruction. The images on the screen reminded her of the stories she had been told back home. These humans were capable of terrible things. But then something strange happened. The reporter on the TV spoke about people risking their lives to save others. A soldier was shown carrying a child out of danger, his face covered in dirt and sweat, but his eyes full of determination. He was protecting the innocent, not attacking them. Zira leaned forward, confused. Why would a bloodthirsty species care about saving others? As she left the cafe, Zira wandered through the city, thinking about what she had seen. Humans were still a mystery to her. Yes, they fought wars. And yes, they had a violent past. But there was more to them than that. She saw people holding hands, helping each other cross the street, sharing food with the homeless. There was kindness here, hidden beneath the surface. For the next few days, Zira continued her observations, waiting for the cruelty to reveal itself. She visited busy markets, watched people in parks, and followed the news. Every time she saw something violent, she also saw something compassionate. A fight would break out, but then strangers would step in to stop it. Someone would steal, but others would offer help. Zira began to doubt her mission. Were humans really as dangerous as the Zrath believed, or were they something more complicated? She had expected to find only bloodthirst, but instead she found a species capable of both violence and kindness. The princess realized this mission would be harder than she thought. She wasn't just observing humans anymore, she was starting to understand them. Princess Zira continued her secret mission, blending in with humans as best she could. Days passed, and she still felt unsure about these strange creatures. They were not the monsters her people had described. Yes, there were signs of violence, but she had also seen moments of compassion. She knew she needed more time to understand them fully. One afternoon, Zira found herself in the middle of a busy marketplace. People crowded around stalls buying food, clothing, and all sorts of goods. The air was filled with noise, the sound of laughter, children playing, and vendors shouting to attract customers. Zira walked through the market, carefully observing every interaction. She stopped at a small fruit stand when something caught her attention. A young boy, no older than 7 or 8, was trying to grab an apple when suddenly he slipped, knocking over the entire fruit display. Apples rolled everywhere, and the vendor immediately rushed over, yelling at the boy in anger. Zira watched closely, expecting the situation to escalate. In her mind, this was it. This was the violence she had been looking for. The vendor grabbed the boy by the arm, clearly furious. The boy's eyes filled with fear, and he began to cry. Zira braced herself, thinking she was about to witness cruelty, but then something unexpected happened. A woman from the crowd stepped forward and gently placed her hand on the vendor's shoulder. "It's just an accident," she said softly, her voice calm. "He's just a kid. Let me pay for the apples." The vendor looked surprised but calmed down, releasing the boy. The woman smiled at the boy, kneeling down to help him gather the apples. "It's okay," she whispered, wiping his tears away. The boy smiled weakly, thankful for her kindness. Zira watched in disbelief. This was not what she had been taught to expect. In her world, weakness was punished, and accidents had consequences. But here kindness won. As the woman walked away with the boy, Zira followed at a distance, wanting to see more. They ended up at a nearby park where the boy ran off to play with some other children. The woman sat on a bench, watching over him. Zira couldn't resist the urge to talk to her. She sat down beside the woman, trying to act natural. "That was kind of you helping the boy like that," Zira said, keeping her voice casual. The woman smiled. "It was nothing. Kids make mistakes. It's important to show them kindness, especially when they're scared." Zira was silent for a moment, thinking about what the woman said. "But what if he does it again? Shouldn't there be consequences?" The woman shook her head gently. "There are always consequences, but not everything needs to be punished harshly. Sometimes understanding and compassion can teach more than anger ever could." Zira felt a strange feeling rise inside her. This was so different from her people's beliefs. The Zrath taught that weakness should be eliminated and mistakes should be met with strength. But here, this human woman spoke of forgiveness and kindness. It didn't make sense to Zira, but at the same time, it made her curious. Over the next few days, Zira began to notice more moments like this. She saw strangers helping each other without expecting anything in return. She saw people donating food to the poor, comforting the sick, and even risking their lives to save others. It was as if there were two sides to humans, one of violence and another of deep compassion. Zira's mind raced with confusion. Could these be the same humans her people feared? How could a species capable of such kindness also be feared for their bloodthirsty nature? The princess was beginning to realize that her mission might not be as simple as she thought. Humans were far more complicated than she had been led to believe, and the more she saw, the more she questioned everything she knew. Princess Zira continued her mission with growing curiosity. The more time she spent among humans, the more confused she became. They were nothing like the violent creatures her people feared. Instead, she saw a species full of contradictions, one moment full of rage, the next filled with kindness. She wondered if she would ever understand their true nature. One evening, Zira found herself in a quiet part of the city. She had been walking for hours, lost in thought, when she noticed two men standing near an alleyway, deep in conversation. They looked serious, their voices low but intense. Intrigued, Zira moved closer, keeping herself hidden behind a nearby tree. As she listened, she realized they were talking about a recent conflict between two countries. One man, tall and muscular, with a scar across his face, spoke with anger in his voice. "The enemy deserves no mercy," he said. "They attacked us first, and we should crush them. That's the only way to make sure they never attack again." The second man, smaller and wearing glasses, shook his head. "Violence isn't the answer," he argued softly. "There's always another way. We should negotiate, try to find peace. War only leads to more pain and suffering." Zira's heart raced as she listened. This was exactly what she had been struggling to understand. These two humans, standing side by side, represented the two sides of humanity she had witnessed. One was full of anger, ready to strike at the first sign of danger. The other sought peace, believing in a solution without bloodshed. The scarred man scoffed. "Peace? How can you talk about peace when our people are dying? Do you think they'll just stop because we ask them nicely? No, they understand strength. If we don't hit back hard, they'll take advantage of us." The man with glasses frowned. "I understand your anger, but violence only creates a cycle. Today we attack them. Tomorrow they retaliate, and it never ends. I've seen too many lives lost because of this endless fighting. There has to be a better way." Zira felt a strange sense of understanding as she listened to their debate. This was the heart of humanity's struggle, the battle between strength and compassion, revenge and forgiveness. Both sides made sense, yet they couldn't seem to agree on the right path. Suddenly, the scarred man noticed Zira standing nearby. He turned towards her, his eyes narrowing. "What do you want?" he asked gruffly, clearly annoyed by her presence. Zira hesitated for a moment, but then stepped forward, her curiosity getting the better of her. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation, she said, her voice steady. You're both talking about war, but from different points of view. Why can't you agree on how to handle it? The man with glasses gave her a gentle smile. Because war is complicated. Some people believe that only force can bring safety, while others believe in the power of diplomacy and kindness. We've been arguing about this for centuries. The scarred man crossed his arms. The world is dangerous, and sometimes you have to fight to survive. That's just how it is. Zira nodded slowly, thinking back to her own people. The Zrath had always believed in strength above all else. They crushed their enemies without hesitation, never showing weakness. But here, among humans, she saw something different, a constant battle between two worlds, two ways of thinking. As the two men continued their conversation, Zira couldn't help but wonder which side was right. The Zrath would agree with the scarred man's view, believing that power and strength were the only ways to protect themselves. But the man with glasses reminded her of the kindness she had seen in humans, the side that showed compassion, even in difficult times. Before she could say more, the two men parted ways, leaving Zira alone with her thoughts. As the night grew darker, she realized that humans were more complicated than she had ever imagined. They were not simply bloodthirsty or kind. They were both, living in a world full of contradictions. And somehow, in the middle of it all, Zira found herself drawn to their struggle. She had come to Earth expecting to find a violent species, but now she saw something deeper. Humans were fighting a battle, not just against each other, but within themselves, between the desire for war and the hope for peace. And that, Zira realized, was what made them so fascinating. Princess Zira's journey on Earth was becoming more personal than she had ever planned. She had set out to study the humans, to understand their bloodthirsty ways, but instead she found herself being drawn into their world. Each day brought new surprises and emotions she hadn't expected. As Zira continued to observe humans, one person kept appearing in her mind, Derek, the man with glasses she had met during the argument between the two men. His calm, thoughtful nature stood out to her. He wasn't like the others who believed in solving problems with violence. He represented something different, something that fascinated Zira. One day, while wandering the same part of the city where she had first met Derek, Zira spotted him again. This time, he was sitting at an outdoor cafe reading a book. His face looked peaceful, a small smile playing on his lips. She felt a strange pull towards him, an urge to talk to him again. Gathering her courage, Zira walked over and sat down at the table across from him. Derek looked up, surprised but smiling when he recognized her. "You again?" he said, closing his book. "I didn't think I'd see you around here." Zira smiled shyly. "I was just passing by. I've been thinking about what you said before, about kindness and finding a better way." Derek nodded, his eyes softening. "I've seen too much war in my life. It destroys everything, families, homes, and hope. But I believe humans are capable of more than just fighting. We can also love, help, and protect without violence." Zira hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding. She had never felt this way before. As a Zrath princess, she had been taught that emotions were a weakness, that love had no place in a warrior's heart. But here she was, feeling something she couldn't explain, something warm, something unfamiliar. "I've seen your people's kindness," she admitted quietly. "It's confusing. Where I come from, strength is everything. We don't show mercy or compassion. But here, I've seen humans care for each other, even when they're hurt or afraid." Derek smiled, leaning forward slightly. "That's the thing about us. We're not perfect. We fight, we make mistakes, but we also love. It's what makes us human." His words stirred something deep inside Zira. She looked into his eyes and saw the truth in them, a truth that was so different from everything she had been taught. She had come to Earth believing that humans were savage, dangerous. But now, sitting across from Derek, she saw that there was more to them than just their violent tendencies. There was love, too, even in the chaos of their world. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the city faded into the background as Zira felt a connection growing between them, something stronger than anything she had ever experienced before. Could it be that she was starting to care for this human? The thought seemed impossible, yet it felt real. Finally, Derek broke the silence. "I don't know where you're from," he said gently, "but it seems like you've seen a lot. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. Sometimes it helps to share your thoughts." Zira felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She wanted to tell him everything, about her mission, about her people, and about the war her kind had always prepared for. But she couldn't. Not yet. It was too risky. Instead, she simply nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Derek. That means more to me than you know." As they sat there, sharing a quiet moment in the middle of the chaotic city, Zira realized something important. Love wasn't a weakness. It was a strength, one that humans carried with them even in their darkest times. And now she was starting to feel that love, too, in the most unexpected way. The war within Zira's heart was growing stronger. She had been sent to study humans and their bloodthirsty nature, but now she found herself falling in love with their kindness. And with Derek, it was a love that could never be, yet she couldn't stop it from happening. For the first time in her life, Zira wasn't sure what her future held. All she knew was that it had changed because of one human and because of the love she had found in the chaos. Princess Zira felt her heart racing as she walked through the city. After her time with Derek, everything had changed. She found herself lost in thoughts about him, his kindness, his smile, and the way he saw the world. It felt both wonderful and terrifying. She was drawn to him, yet she knew their worlds were so different. As Zira returned to her hidden quarters, she thought about her mission. She was sent to Earth to gather information about humans for her people, the Zrath. They had always viewed humans as a dangerous threat, but now she was seeing them through a different lens. It felt wrong to think of them as mere monsters when she had witnessed their kindness, especially in Derek. However, Zira knew that her feelings for Derek posed a dangerous risk. What if her people discovered her attachment to a human? They would see it as a weakness. They would not understand the compassion she had come to admire. They might even see it as a betrayal. That night, Zira paced in her room, her mind racing. She needed to make a decision. She could either continue her mission and report back to her people with what she had learned, or she could turn her back on her duties and embrace the life she was beginning to see with Derek. The next day, Zira met Derek at the same cafe where they had shared their first conversation. She could see he was happy to see her, but his smile faded as he noticed her troubled expression. "What's wrong, Zira?" he asked, concern filling his eyes. "I have to tell you something important," she said, her voice trembling. "My time here is almost over. I was sent to observe humans, to learn about your ways. I didn't expect to feel this." Derek's expression shifted. "What do you mean this?" he asked, searching her eyes. Zira took a deep breath. "I've grown to care about you, Derek. I didn't want it to happen, but I can't help it. I feel more alive here than I ever have back home. But if I return, I must report what I have seen, and that includes you." Derek looked stunned, his mouth slightly open as he processed her words. "But what if your people don't accept what you've learned? What if they see us as enemies?" Zira's heart sank at his words. "I fear they will. My people believe in strength and power. They wouldn't understand the kindness I've seen here. They see humans as a threat, and if they knew about us, they might react violently." Derek leaned closer, his eyes full of worry. "What are you saying? Do you have to leave? Can't you stay here? We could try to find a way to bridge our worlds, to show your people who we really are." Zira shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I wish it were that simple. My loyalty is to my people, and I cannot abandon my duty. But I also don't want to lose you." The pain in her heart was overwhelming. The thought of leaving Derek behind was unbearable. But the thought of returning home and facing her people with feelings that contradicted everything they believed was equally terrifying. "I have to make a choice," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't continue my mission and be with you at the same time. It's too dangerous for both of us." Derek reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You're not just a princess. You're a person with feelings. You deserve to follow your heart. But I can't ask you to choose me over your duty." Zira felt a wave of emotion crash over her. She squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of his touch. "I don't want to lose you, but I also can't betray my people. It's not just my life at stake, it's the future of our worlds." In that moment, Zira knew she had to make a decision. Would she return to the Zrath and report everything she had learned, or would she risk everything to stay with Derek? The future felt heavy on her shoulders, and the weight of her choice would shape both their lives. As they sat in silence, Zira's heart ached with uncertainty. She had to choose a path, one that could lead to either love or conflict. The dangerous decision loomed over her like a dark cloud, and she knew she had to decide soon.